somebody said, "Right, do you hear there? HMS Sheffield had been hit and sunk, and there were lots of casualties." And it
Wow.
was at that point that we went, "Oh, hang on, this is real." Because I think a lot of people were thinking we'd get down to the equator and they go, "Yeah, it's all over. Henry Kissinger's done his thing." He was the guy, I think, the diplomat that the Americans put up to go and talk between the Brits and the Argentinians to try and, pave the way for a peace talks, and it didn't work. Um, and so when they hit the Sheffield, that was when we first realised there was, we really were going to be continuing
So
down
you
south.
you heard this through
Yeah, the
the
tannoy.
speakers,
Yeah, yeah,
and that was the Argentinians had sunk a British
yeah.
battleship.
Yeah. I was 24 years old. It was quite a shock to say, "Shit, this is for
Mm.
real. We really are going to war. We're going to," at the time, you just, everything's lovely when you're 24. It's all peace and love and roses. Nothing bad ever happens in your life. Then all of a sudden, within a week of getting down there, things did start to get bad, and you see things that you really wish you hadn't seen, and you can't unsee them. Really critically injured people. And I looked after a guy from the Sheffield whose name was Chief Petty Officer John Strange. I will never forget him. He's a good buddy. And he had 60% burns to his body. His face was fine, but his body was really badly burnt. And he'd been brought to HMS Hermes, I think, alongside a body bag for him just in case. This is all out in the public domain, so this isn't anything secret. And he knows all of this. And there was every expectation because in military warfare, you do the most that you can for the most people. You don't concentrate all your effort into one person when other people, many more people could die as a result if you concentrate all your efforts. So you do as much as you can for the many. Um, and so some people, there was an expectation that if you got 60% burns, and back in 1982, there's a good chance that your chance of dying is pretty high, to be honest. He didn't. He did extremely well, actually. Um, he had quite a bit of surgery, skin grafting, and so on the Uganda. But my job was to look after him in what was the old hospital of the Uganda, which was way down in the bowels of the ship, and it had to be really hot. It was about 90 degrees in there. It was so hot, but you have to do that to reduce the fluid loss from burns victims.
Oh, interesting.
So he had drips and all the rest of it. And as he recovered, I had to put him, he had to be bathed and changed, and dressings were really, really painful, that sort of thing. And in order to minimize his pain, we developed a really good painkilling system called eggnog. And I would make him a huge jug of eggnog with a lot of alcohol in it, which obviously had to be quality tested by me before giving it to him. And he would have that along with some morphine or whatever painkillers he was having. So he would have a drink in the bath of eggnog, and then I'd do the dressings
Why
for
why
him.
eggnog? Does that just take his
Don't
mind
know. I
off it
think
a
it was all
bit?
we had.
I love that.
I think it was all we had.
Drink this magic
Yes.
potion.
He said, "I can't stand the stuff now." I said, "No, I'm the same." Actually, it sort of was.
Wow.
But yeah, I fed him eggnog and morphine and did all his dressings. And he did really well. And he actually went back to work after a period of recuperation, and
What?
he ended up on the Hong Kong squadron. Carried on in the navy. Yeah, it was
Jesus
a
Christ.
remarkable recovery.
But what do you do when someone's in that position? I mean, in terms of like, they must be terrified, and are you
We're terrified as well.
yeah.
There was aircraft flying around. There was always, even, you might be in a big ship that's white and got big red crosses on the side, but there's always the argument, well, those red crosses are a great big target.
That they don't hit me targets,
Yeah.
or here I am.
We had to go out every night. We had to go into what was called the Red Cross box. So we sailed away from potential, hit and miss. But right at the end of the war, I think an aircraft missile, a Sidewinder missile, went off from the land, and they're heat-seeking missiles, and we were the hottest thing, and we were actually just outside Stanley. We'd gone ashore, in fact, because the war was over, the surrender had been signed. And then a Sidewinder went off, and it hit. It was aiming for us, apparently. It didn't hit us. Unfortunately, it hit a group of soldiers, and some of them were really badly injured. And we ended up taking them on even after the surrender had been signed, and they,
Oh,
one of them had lost his leg.
that's
It was
gutting as
horrific,
well, isn't it?
absolutely horrific.
You just thought it would just end and
Yeah,
that's
that was
it.
stopped, but it was kind of one of ours that had caused the problem. Right,
Right.
it wasn't enemy action. So yeah, and that sort of thing happens.
Obviously, when the war was progressing, eventually it boots on the ground, right?
Mm.
I don't really know much about the Falklands War, but then were you having to follow behind
No, we
and
didn't. No, we
you just
didn't go
stayed out?
ashore at all. No, everything got
It's
brought
much
to us by
safer, isn't it?
helicopter. Yeah. We had everything set up. We had up by the time of the Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram, we actually set up another room for burns, and 14% of our casualties were burns as a result of that. So the Sheffield burns and the Coventry there was very small numbers burnt from that, and that's why we looked after them in the ship's hospital. And then when the Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram were bombed, and there's so many casualties from the Welsh and Scots Guards, that I mean, we ended up setting up a big room, the officers' mess. It was great. They didn't know where they could go because their bar had to be shut because we had to change it into a
Sorry,
ward. What a
sir.
shame. Um, and we made that room. I had myself and another nurse, and we set that up as a 50-bedded burns unit, and we did that in about 2 hours. We had mattresses on the floor. It was a real sort of field hospital, but on board a ship. And we took in 25 casualties in the first hour, all with hand and face burns.
What? Why hands and face?
Because they weren't wearing anti-flash. So in the Navy, if you're, and I think the gear that they had at the time wasn't particularly good quality. The material wasn't burn-proof, bomb-proof, flash-proof. It is nowadays. But the Navy certainly always do have that nowadays. But these guys obviously weren't protected. They were just in sort of normal battle dress, combat uniforms. None of that's
Damn.
particularly anti-flammable.
Burns are a horrific thing to obviously treat because it's not like you can fix them or or even like apply the treatment and then come back and see them later. It's like it's going to get
Yeah,
worse.
it does. And we had so the Navy are renowned for having Chinese laundrymen on board their ships, and these guys are great. And they do. They do all the laundry on board, and they're very used to working very hot environments. And the Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram were, no exception to that rule. They had them. And I remember one of the Chinese laundrymen, he came in and his face was like a football. It was huge, just brown from the burns. With his eyes were closed, he couldn't see a thing, and his hands were burnt. And he was absolutely terrified because he couldn't open his eyes, and he knew that his face just was swollen. And there's pictures actually in some books and in the Imperial War Museum of this. Um, and I said to him, "Look, these are going to go down within about 3 days. Your eyes are going to open and your swelling will go down." He said, "I don't believe you," and it did. And so we showed him photographs of before and after, and he wasn't the only one, but it was, I think, because of the Chinese. It was just because I think they swelled up more for some reason. I don't know why, more so than the Welsh Guards did.
Wow. So you mentioned that it was about 14% of
14% of
so
casualties,
what about the rest of it then? What
shrapnel, um, yeah,
many
from
bullets? I mean, is it a
yeah, a lot of gunshot wounds,
yeah.
yeah,
Damn.
and
Is
explosives,
that
mortar
easier to
stuff.
deal with in some way?
Well, they would go to surgery fairly quickly and have the metal stuff taken out.
Sewed up.
But well, no, they don't. They do a thing in military surgery called delayed primary suture. So what they do is they open it all out because there's fragments and material from what they're wearing can be taken into the wound itself by a bullet or by shrapnel. You can't necessarily clean out the whole wound in a war situation, so you clean it and debride it as best you can, and then you leave them open for 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days, and then they bring them back to theatre and then sew them up once there's no sign of infection. In which time they're having loads of antibiotics and everything to try and reduce that risk.